dir noch angesäche, so bist du ihr aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschäche? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. This is Dan Baltic.
And this is Matt Pegas.
And this is episode, God, I need to check it, but I think it's like 57. What do we say, Matt?
Maybe like 58 or 9. We haven't hit 60 yet. It's a
All
high
right,
50s episode.
We've been at this for a while. We've been doing this New Right thing, so we've even like forgotten at this point. But
Plus we scrambled, like we switched the order around of some episodes, so I'm totally lost count. But
we are very blessed today to have Kino Corner with us. Kino Corner.
Yeah.
Sorry, I always have not been able to know how to pronounce that.
You know who also says Kino Corner, but I've never had the heart to tell him he's saying it wrong.
Who?
Do you know David Stewart?
No.
Oh, okay. He's he actually would be good to have on this podcast. He's like a retired professor, but does like the e-publishing, or he likes to rail against TradPub a lot. And
totally.
He's definitely in this scene, but he's over in Houston, but originally from California, and he always says, when he's doing a live stream on YouTube, he always says Kino Corner whenever I get in the chat. I'm like, I don't want to look like a dick and say this is how you pronounce it, because that's dickish.
I'm happy that you corrected me, because I wanna have the right pronunciation for the pod. I am more of an elder statesman here at 37, but I still know what Kino means.
Kino is
it's like an old 4chan word, right?
Well, I mean, half my family is Russian, and it's the Russian word for movie.
Okay.
Oh.
So
I see.
But it is like a play, the name of it is like a play on the 4chan word too, because Kino, also can mean a lot of things if you use it in the 4chan terminology.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kinetic, what have you.
Well, it's all from the Greek word kinetic, of motion picture film.
Yeah. Before we get too into it, I just want to tell our audience who you are, what you do. So the Kino Corner, you are known as Kino Corner, but you also have a YouTube channel called the Kino Corner, which in recent years has really exploded. I was watching the Literally Me Taxi Driver short video that you did.
Wait a sec. Hey, you keep talking. I'm just gonna come back in 1 second. You keep talking, introducing me. I'm gonna come back.
Sure.
Hey, are we recording also our faces?
No, just audio.
Okay, well, you'll be able to describe it to the audience.
Okay, I will.
Always take a screenshot.
So Kino Corner is a YouTube channel started by, I don't know if he named axes, so by Kino Corner, we'll just call him that. He started before COVID, I believe. It really exploded during and after COVID, and nice. And so Kino has returned, and he is wearing the jacket of the driver from Drive, and that is kind of so. Kino has a YouTube channel where he dissects movies kind of from an outsider, dissident perspective, but particularly from a perspective that is, in a sense, our guys' perspective. By our guys,
let's just say I know Courtesy Arvin.
By our guys, I don't necessarily mean with all the political connotations of that, but I do mean with the kind of like Sigma male kind of internet, alienated from current society, from the
Yeah.
current year, as it were. And so I think a lot of us have
Current year plus
bonded.
8. Current year plus
Sure.
8.
Yeah.
Remember, current year is 2015. We gotta.
True. And a lot of us have bonded over this, like, sense of alienation and like, well, who are our heroes? Our heroes are, Blade Runner, Travis Bickle,
Ryan Gosling in
Patrick,
those movies.
Ryan
Yeah.
Gosling in all of his movies, Patrick Bateman, I was about to say. And so these are the kind of like you have, and I'm sure, Kino Corner does more than this, but you like are well known for dissecting movies from the perspective of someone who's looking for something Kino, who's someone who's
Yeah.
looking for something that kind of like vibes with our guys. And
Well,
yeah,
I would
go
say I would
ahead,
say
Kino.
the Sigma I would say the Sigma male stuff, but I think I'm equally known as being the guy who's really, really into fucked up movies too.
Oh, true,
Mhm.
yeah. Like,
Because one of my good friends, you guys might know him, Lewis from Massacre Video.
I don't actually.
Don't actually, yeah.
Oh, so he's part of NPCC.
Oh, nice.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I do a lot of stuff with them. That's why I was in New York just a few weeks ago. Was for
Okay.
NPCC. So I always go out. I always, go out, help out with all the NPCC stuff. I've known Creston actually
Mhm.
before he was in NPCC. We worked at this shitty editing farm in Pasadena together.
Oh, interesting.
Back in 2017 or 2018. So I've been in with those guys for a long time. And Lewis and I, well, Creston actually put me onto Sallow, funny enough.
Nice.
Back then. And
Sallow Forum?
and he put me onto
I think the movie probably.
Never mind.
Yeah, no, not the Sallow. Not the Sallow
I
Forum.
didn't know Creston was
Although
in it.
I do, yeah, I do know about the Sallow Forum, of course. But
a little bit of a different speed than the movie.
yeah, it's a little different. Yeah. And then Creston actually put me onto Pasolini and Zhukovsky back then. But yeah, I really like the fucked up movies as well. Actually, right after I record this, my friends come over to my house, and Lewis, shout out to Massacre Video. He's actually restoring Men Behind the Sun right now, and he's
Don't know that one.
restoring five of Uwe Boll's movies.
Okay.
Uwe, I had him on my podcast. He's a riot. I love Uwe so much. But my friend is coming over, and we're watching this movie called Philosophy of a Knife. Have you guys heard about that?
No,
I have not.
It's by Andrei Iskanov, and it's like this super like micro budget 4.5 hour torture porn movie about Unit 731.
Okay, that the Japanese. No.
Yeah. So that's the that was the Japanese like
yeah. Okay,
experimental.
I know.
Yeah. And with these movies, with these particularly these kinds of movies, I like to watch them because there's always so many like tall tales and legends behind them, and people are like, "You're never gonna be the same after this. It's gonna make you throw up. You're gonna have nightmares." And you know what? Like 9 times out of 10, that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I like to watch them. Also, like I've worked on a few horror movies. I understand, like a lot of my friends do practical effects. I watch them because I like the practical effects, and then if there's like something deeper, then I like to dig into that, and then that becomes shocking cinema on my channel. Back to literally me, I actually just rewatched last night at Austin Film Society. That definitely fits, and it's getting a Criterion release in June called After Hours. Have you guys seen that one?
Oh, I did see After Hours. I love it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just watched that this last weekend. I coincidentally, I was brilliant. Yeah.
It describes every time I visit New York, it's like that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, because I just got back from New York, and then they were playing that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go. I haven't seen that in like 5 years. Let me go watch that. And actually, the main character looks and acts just like my coworker and one of my best friends.
Right.
So
Griffin Dune. Huh?
Now it's So now it's just like it was uncanny watching it. I was like, this is just Ian.
I love how in that movie New York is like overrun like by, violent and degenerate punks. And like
Yeah.
obviously that was not even true even then. But like now if you did like an after hours New York now, it would be a, perhaps unproducible
I think it was true
film.
back in the I think it was true back in the 80s. Like didn't it only start to get better in the early 90s?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying here is like the kind of like punk scene was not the people who were terrorizing people in New
Oh,
York
it was like the
Yeah.
in the
vigilantes and
80s.
the burglars and but
Yeah.
then
Yeah, just
there's
the
the
traditional like crime elements.
I like the I like this one little scene in After Hours where he's in the
Mhm.
diner. This homeless guy keeps coming in, and the guy keeps kicking him out, and he keeps coming back in.
Yeah.
Like this random homeless guy. And I remember I went to this one. So when I was in New York last time, I was hanging out with my friend James. I think you guys know James, and
Yeah.
he is very much against eating seed oils. So he has like all the spots in New York like that don't cook with seed oils. And we
Oh,
were
I would
going,
actually like to know that because I am in New York. So like,
yeah,
yeah, please hit
yeah.
me up.
Well, you should hit him up on Twitter DMs. He'll
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
every place. And so we're in the East Village, which is like I don't really particularly care for the village.
Mm.
And we were sitting outside at this chicken place that they fry in beef tallow. In the span of 10 minutes, we had 5 like tweakers or crackheads or
Mhm.
whatever, like people high out of their minds coming to us asking if we could, if we had money or if we would give them all of our food or whatever, like within the span of 10 minutes, like 5 people. And Austin, it's getting kind of bad here, but it's not like that bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like I haven't experienced this in a city ever since I was in LA.
Yeah, no, I'm in LA, and it's also been getting worse. Not even to
All the
regale.
animals come out at night, man.
Yeah, or in the morning. I don't even want to. It's just sad,
The
honestly. This
scum.
like homeless guy came in butt naked. This coffee bean and tea leaf. I was writing in the other day, and they had to call the cops. I was
Wow.
just, I don't know. It just gets
I've
getting
seen
a
some
little
shit in
weird.
West
Yeah,
Hollywood. Let me tell you.
yeah, that's where I was.
Yeah. I had this really kind of surreal experience outside of the new Bev.
Hmm. Yeah.
When I was in line to see I forget what movie. Maybe it was Bob LaFlambeur.
Mhm.
Have you guys seen that one?
No, actually.
It's
No.
by it inspired Ocean's 11. I actually have the poster
Oh,
there.
cool. Yeah.
Um,
I've heard of it then. Yeah, I think that's.
It's by Jean-Pierre Melville, who kind of was like the literally me director of France in the mid 20th century. He made Le Samurai and Army of Shadows and a whole bunch of really, really great movies. Le Cercle Rouge. And Bob LaFlemme. So I was standing outside in line, and there's a woman in a wedding dress across the street, walking in circles, talking to herself. And she started undressing, and then she completely took off her entire wedding dress and started like shoving it into a trash can, and she was wearing like a swimsuit underneath. And then after she stuffed her wedding dress in a trash can, she started going up to cars, like random cars that were like stopped at a red light or a stop sign or something, and like hitting on their windows, trying to talk to the people inside. And I was like, what the hell is going
Well, it
on?
reminds me, if you've read Unqualified Reservations, there's that I don't know if Dan or you, if either of you know this part, but I was just reading the passage, published compendium of it, and I have this link to this famous, I guess, or somewhat famous, or maybe it's mostly just famous because Curtis referenced it now, but a video of like a guy in Las Vegas like attacking a car. Does this sound familiar? The corner man.
I haven't
Anyway.
read Unqualified Reservations. The girl I was staying with in New York, I guess they had the after party of the book there at her place.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Ellie, you guys know Ellie?
I don't, but like maybe I do on
But
Twitter.
She said I wanted to like steal a bunch of books. I want to steal a book, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I think I have a lot." And then somebody had like raided and like taken a lot. She only had one book left, so I didn't want to take it.
Oh yeah, I mean they were like giving them out there, which was tremendous. Yeah. Like I got, I guess, too drunk and I forgot to take my copy of Unqualified Reservations, so I did wind up paying for them for a copy. but I mean that's cool. Like I'm happy to
I
support
don't mind paying for a copy for my
support the
friends.
boys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Eh.
so get into
Yeah.
into the discussion
Actually,
at hand, I
Dan, if you
guess.
don't mind me jumping in, I did want to
Yeah,
ask
go ahead.
one other question on After Hours.
Oh yeah, of
Not that it
course.
has to be a huge side quest, but what do you think of the similarities between that and Eyes Wide Shut?
I mean, they're both like this kind of like New York nightmare, you know, this kind of like
Right. Yeah.
that also has a highly sexual
Yeah, like
undertones.
everyone wants to. I thought it was almost uncanny. I mean, I'm a firm believer in reframing art. I have no doubt that Kubrick, of course, saw After Hours and that was like a major.
Yeah, and I believe
Just
that
the
Eyes Wide
tone
Shut.
of like everyone wanting to fuck the protagonist in this weird, uncanny way. And there's some other small random things too.
We
And
can't hear
Eyes
you
Wide
kind of.
Shut, I think it's more about that temptation out. It's more about that temptation outside of marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, can you hear me?
definitely. Yeah, sorry, you cut
Okay,
out
it's
for a
more
second,
about
but
like
yeah,
that temptation outside of marriage. Oh, okay. In Eyes Wide Shut, I think it's more about that temptation outside of marriage, like, and constantly being tempted. And it's like, is he? This drive jacket is actually really warm, so I'm just.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
I don't know how I'm gonna survive. My friends and I are all gonna wear scorpion jackets to the Barbie premiere.
Nice.
Oh man. Well, they keep theaters overly
But,
air conditioned in my experience, so you might be fine.
yeah, they do. It's always cold. But in After Hours, it's actually like all the women who are coming on to him is shown more in like a negative perspective. It's more of
Mhm.
like something that is something that is to be feared, right? Like these
Yeah.
women wanna have sex with him, but he doesn't want it, and
Yeah.
it's these
Yeah.
women's advances on him that actually kind of like really creeps him out, and it's shown as being really creepy.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
like, he's just like, I just
that
want
is
to go home
quite
and sleep.
distinct. Yeah, yeah. It's more like what
Yeah,
Bap would say. Yeah.
and when he doesn't give in to their advances is when everything goes wrong, because a woman accuses him of being the burglar to get back at the perceived slight that he had against her. And when in reality he was just like, he probably wasn't going to talk to her again. Like the one woman who's putting up all the like, this is the burglar, he's probably not going to talk to her again, but she doesn't give him
Catherine O'Hara.
Like he's like, no, it wasn't Catherine O'Hara, I think it was Terry Garr.
Oh, okay.
The 60s looking lady with the
right. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
And then Catherine O'Hara sees that, and she's like, "You're dead, pal."
Right.
And in reality, it's Cheech Marin. It's Cheech Marin who's the burglar. And it's really when he gives in to the woman's flirtations at the end that he's saved.
Yeah, no, it's
he has to sort of like play along.
Accepts the longhouse.
Sort of, and then he gets into no, I mean it's very like, I hate to even say this word, but it's very like red pilled on that. Like about women.
Well, like, dude, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, you know.
Yeah.
That's
of course I guess there's another, I say Eyes Wide Shut is like After Hours. After Hours is also a bit like The Tenant, the Polanski movie where they gets mummified. It's kind of a similar endpoint. And they're all, I think they're different angles on the same they're different angles on a similar issue, but definitely in both The Tenant and After Hours there is that like smothering female thing going on. Yeah.
The yuppie men having these like city nightmares.
Yeah, no, it's dope. I thought that I watched it randomly because I
creepy.
saw it came on HBO, and I thought that's like the best movie I've seen in a long while.
Yeah, I mean, it was like before all of this censorship, and you could actually like write, and produce things that rang true, which kind of like gives us a nice, segue to the issue of artistic freedom in film. and the extent to which kind of like, so we've discussed this, Kino, we've discussed this, between each other, that like obviously we both agree that the mainstream is not artistically free. It's very censorious. It's very woke, whatever that word means to people. But I think we all kind of have a sense of what that means. And as a result, you
People really
cannot.
love who is it? Karl Popper?
I mean, there's a bunch of
yeah,
them,
or something like that.
yeah, Foucault,
Yeah,
Marcuse, what have you. But yeah, just to kind of like,
it's just like how yeah. I just want to say how I saw it, like as far as like why it's not free, is because there's so many levels of bureaucracy in like mainstream Hollywood right now. So it's like, say you have a script that does well, right? It gets top of the blacklist. It's like
yeah,
people really like it. So Paramount or Paramount or Fox or somebody is like, hey, we option the script. It goes to their bottom level junior development exec, right? And that person reads it and says like, hey, I really like the script, but here's some notes because the person above me is going to want you to change this and that. Like they're not going to like it unless this is changed. So you go, okay, let me change those things. It goes up another level. They do the same thing. It goes up another level. It goes up another level. And like by the time that it gets to the point of like where they're going to buy it and maybe use it, it's so neutered that like they've completely taken any of the teeth out of that script.
Yeah, it was like After Hours, and then suddenly by the time it's at the top, it's Black Panther. That type of deal.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah,
like, I
Gaspar
mean,
Noé famously hated Black Panther.
Yeah.
What did Noé say? He didn't like it?
Noé said he ran out of the theater after 10 minutes because he couldn't stand the R&B music.
Yeah. I guess that's harder than the like weird frequencies that he put into Irreversible to make people vomit.
I would much rather take Irreversible than Black Panther.
100%. I mean, Irreversible is a good movie. It's
times.
One of the greatest.
Like, so, but I mean, like, with regard to the woke stuff, our audience knows it. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows kind of like it's impossible to produce anything that is good art because good art has to be honest. Good art, cannot be kind of like dovetail with propaganda. And so we all know that. The thing that we talked about was how the kind of nascent based literature, based film, based artistic scene is in some respects a little censorious. And they have, kind of ideas about like what types of stories should be told from a kind of best ideological best practices. And this makes, I just want to say, this makes perfect sense when you are trying to combat an ideology that a hegemonic liberalism and hegemonic wokeness. So you want to double down and say like, we cannot give an inch, everything has to be Conan the Barbarian, everything has to be a kind of like purely based right-wing movie. And the thing is, like, if you're a real artist, I mean, like, your tendencies might run there. It might run toward Conan the Barbarian. And I recently watched that. I will say that that was a work of art. And that's great.
Yeah, I like Conan.
But there are,
Shout
there's a whole
to, John Milius.
Exactly. But there's a whole spectrum of art out there that is more in some respects, certainly not heroic, more satire, self-deprecating. I like all of our listeners know I wrote a novel called Nutcracker, which is, proving to be very popular among our guys, despite the fact that it's self-deprecating. And I think there's a hunger for this out there too. There's a hunger for art and film and media that presents a non-woke view, but also something that's not necessarily heroic. That, kind of
Yeah.
is either
I think
comical.
people just want something that's honest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think people just want something that's honest and something that actually like speaks to what people feel like. You know, the like we look at like I've been talking to a few people about like, you know, like what is like dissident film, and but if you look at like the late 60s into the 70s, like the new Hollywood, like all those movies were essentially dissident movies. You know, Five Easy Pieces, Taxi Driver,
Mm.
Mean Streets, The King of Marvin Gardens, The Last Detail, uh, and you know, John Milius was making a lot of movies at the same time. Was friends with all those guys, and you know, it was a mix of the political spectrum, but they had kind of gotten tired of like that, uh, the Hollywood epic or the
Right.
you know, the more cheesy sort of Hollywood stuff that was maybe prevalent like in the early 60s. Uh, and there were these young voices that were speaking to uh, problems that like maybe speaking to societal issues that young people I mean a lot of people had at the time. Like, I mean, Taxi Driver
Totally.
really dealt with
Totally.
the fact that New York was a total shithole, and was able to sort of incorporate all that into kind of a neo-noir slash western. um and you know, so like and we look back on New Hollywood, it's like, man, that's like that's like one of the best eras of American cinema, because it was like all these directors coming up who were making these very almost like anti-Hollywood movies, and they had a really good systems in place. I mean, Dennis Hopper, Easy Rider is, I
Mm.
think, one of the greatest movies of all time. I think that
Yeah.
I think that in some circles has been very misunderstood, because how I read Easy Rider, it's like a satire or like a deconstruction of the 60s hippie movement.
Mhm.
Sure.
It, you know, doesn't portray any of the hippies in any kind of good light. You, you know, and it's so funny that it's off like one of the first places they start off is like the movie is actually kind of trad in a weird way, where they go to the man who has the ranch. He has all the kids, and you know, they're all good Christians, and he's like, man, this is like they're living like the life that everybody wants. And then they go to the hippie commune where they don't even know how to, like, you know, plant any kind of crops. They get all their food from the city. They're totally like just you know, like
Yeah.
it's like ignorant of any kind of farming methods. And then like the closer they get to New Orleans, like the more kind of hellish their world becomes. And then the Mardi Gras, like the ultimate debaucherousness, is where they kind of have this like descent into hell. Um, and but yeah, no, Dennis, and then with like the last movie, and Dennis Hopper was like a big proponent of this like dissident filmmaking. I mean, and even in the movies that he acted in, a lot of them were a lot like that. But that like kind of kicked off BBS Studios, and I think that what allowed some of these movies to be made and to thrive was their system that BBS had back then, which is like, hey, you're not going to have a big budget. You're going to get like $1 million. I mean, maybe less. But we're going to give you complete creative control, and all we ask is that you don't go over budget and you finish the movie on time.
Yeah.
And you know, so the small budgets allowed people to have like more creative control, and that's how we got some great movies like Five Easy Pieces and The Last Picture Show that you know, that were sort of exploring topics that like no Hollywood movie
Yeah.
explore at that time. But they ended up becoming hits. You know, like everybody
People responded
remembers.
to it. Yeah.
Anybody who knows anything about film, knows The Last Picture Show. They know Five Easy Pieces. They know Easy Rider. You know, and and these movies have lasted for such a long time. And then what you also had in the 70s were like exploitation directors like Roger Corman, who also were fostering all this young talent. You know, like, and it's kind of funny that I was talking about Massacre Video a little bit earlier. But we're almost kind of in a similar place, because Massacre Video is like an exploitation, exploitation, like a distributor. And that's where Alex Lee Moyer releases her documentaries.
Right. Yeah.
Is
That's, I knew the name
Massacre,
from somewhere. Right.
you
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, so Lewis is kind of fashioning himself to be like a new Roger Corman in that regard. And you look at, like, who was under the wing of Roger Corman, and it was like Martin Scorsese, Coppola, Altman, they all kind of came up through this guy. And and it's like these kind of outs, like it's these people who could make really a lot of films really cheaply outside of Hollywood, that kind of brought in all these like young voices now we consider to be some of the masters of cinema. And I think that's like the proper way to go about these things. Like, I talking about like this kind of like wanting to make movies that are ideological. I don't really think of any, when I write or when I make anything, I don't really think of ideology at all. Because I just have this like gut feeling that if I'm writing something and I'm thinking about ideology, I want to get across this political point or something like that.
Exactly.
I feel like that will immediately date my movie. And so I don't want to do that. And I and I know that leading up to this, you asked me too about like working with Asher Penn from Sex Magazine, who is a lib, and Delicious Tacos also isn't necessarily right wing.
True.
Oh yeah,
very true.
But it's like, it's just kind of like pack of misfits,
totally. Which
the politics don't really matter so much as people who are just like really, really thirsty, or really hungry and thirsty, whatever you want. Thirsty has too much of a sexual connotation. But maybe when I'm talking about Asher and Delicious Tacos, maybe that
makes sense.
Yeah, no, there's there's a thirst.
But they're thirsty. They're thirsty for something that is like fresh, something that
totally.
Like what mainstream movie is actually diving into something like the opioid crisis, or something like the destruction of like middle class America, or something like about poor white people in a flyover state. It's like,
I mean, the thing is, like the ones that do that, it's all kind of like caveated with like, well, here's our BIPOC or LGBTQ protagonist, which like grounds it in like, actually this is an LGBTQ struggle, not a struggle of, because like, obviously there's a certain demographic which the regime, whatever you want to call it, does not like to valorize.
Or you get something like Shut In by the Daily Wire, where they completely misused Vincent Gallo, and
I don't see it, but
they have it set against the opioid crisis, but it's done in such a on the nose kind of way, and it's done in such like a neocon. It has all this like really shoved in sort of like neocon George Bush era Republican sort of ideology.
Well, like Yellowstone, like the trappings, like the meme, the Yellowstone meme with Kevin Costner, the hick lib, like all the trappings of conservatism. Like, we like guns, we like beer, we like horses. But damn, if we do not recognize that this land belongs to indigenous people, and we have a lot to learn from our such and such. Like, it's it's kind of like, it's important to remember that this, like Yellowstone, all these things are written by Hollywood writer rooms full of libs. So it's kind of like, how do we sell a show to the chuds that, we can still, sign off on and be like, this still has our values, so it's okay.
It's
And like,
exactly
so I
like
think,
Black Rifle Coffee
essentially,
aesthetics.
Yeah.
yeah, essentially, what, to my mind, what dissident filmmaking should be doing is producing films and, stories that they would not sign off on, and that they would say these have the wrong values. These have the, you're kind of
Yeah.
creating the wrong heroes and the wrong villains, and that's dissident filmmaking,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, like the one I'm working on, the one I'm writing right now, I sent you a work in
Yeah, I
progress
read
of the
it. It's
rough, so
it's
it is
good.
still
Yeah.
very rough. It's still very rough. There's a lot of stuff that, what I'm basically doing right now. So I've done the opposite beforehand, where I like overwrite the first draft or the rough draft, and I go through and I cut it. But with this one, I want to get like the skeleton in there first, and then put the meat on there later.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's and my goal in this script was, how do I humanize a mass shooter or a
Yeah.
potential
Yeah.
mass shooter? And like Hollywood, I know that I'm gonna have to get independent funding for it, which I can do. I've been I've been very lucky that I've been able to make some good connections who can
Mhm.
make that happen. But Hollywood would never want to make a movie about, like basically like a Gummo type character who lives like in a shitty apartment, whatever, that wants to commit like a
Yeah.
mass shooting, and it's like, oh, you can't humanize somebody as despicable as that. But it's like, well, like, what, my question is like, well, why can't I? Like, obviously
Yeah.
this is something that's terrible, but like, but if we always, if even in art, like, I feel like in art, you should be like kind of breaching some taboos. You should be like,
Absolutely.
and like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna take somebody who like everybody hates. I'm gonna get them to actually like them, and maybe, um, or maybe not quite like them, but maybe at least understand
Understand them.
them,
Yeah.
in some way.
No, for sure. I mean, friend of the pod.
Because we
Yeah.
just have this whole culture of like villainizing and villainizing and villainizing, and as I see that, that's only going to lead to worse and worse social strife. And it's like, maybe it's time that we start to think like, maybe these people are people too, and maybe what they do are systemic, or they're symptoms of a larger cultural disease that we have
Definitely.
at the moment.
Yeah. No, the book I wrote, I'm not even trying to plug this, but that my debut
No,
novel,
no, you should
Terra,
plug, Matt.
published before
Dragon Day. Everyone
Dragon
should read
Day.
it.
Yeah. Is similar. It's about someone who commits a bombing. And it was very much in the same vein, getting sort of behind humanizing someone who might do that. And I was also going to say, so it's a common enough theme, and I totally get what you're saying, and I think that for as much as we talk about mass shootings, we talk about them in terms of, obviously, on the liberal side, gun restriction, and even like the mental health conversation, I don't think always goes deep enough, and I think that art should be able to explore that.
I don't like the mental, like, whenever conservatives are like, we have a mental health problem, it's like, you know what? I don't think that that's actually the case. Like, you want to say you have a mental health problem, but you don't want to actually say what the problem is. Like, you don't want to actually get into the details. You don't want to talk about isolation and loneliness. You don't want to talk about porn addiction. You don't want to talk about drug addiction that's rampant right now.
You don't want to talk about nihilism.
Talk about the dissolution of
Well,
families.
Absolutely.
You don't want to talk about nihilism.
Yeah.
Like the very kind of like,
Yeah.
I had a somewhat viral tweet about this, which was something to the effect of, you're telling me that,
I saw that tweet, yeah.
a bunch of people from all over the place who are united by nothing besides, like, competing for resources, who are in a degenerate sexual culture, who have no higher beliefs, are having problems. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's kind of like, in order to actually kind of, situate and diagnose the mental health issues, you would have to kind of tear down the post-war order and say like, well,
Completely.
mass immigration was a
Yeah.
bad thing. All of like, women in the workforce was a bad thing, and all of these, things which kind of are kind of sacrosanct now in some respects. Like it's, so like, yes, it's kind of like weird. It's like, you say like when, the right wing is just like, it's a mental health thing. Well, that's like the tip of the iceberg. And the whole problem is that, we're not in a position where like politically we can, discuss the whole
Yeah.
iceberg.
Yeah, we like, we can't, and it's almost too taboo to really get into that. And as I see it going forward too, it's only going to get worse with automation and AI.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen to a lot of working class people when all of a sudden their jobs that they depend on are now taken over by automation and by AI? And that's what all these corporations. I mean, they love like illegal immigration because it's effectively slave labor for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And drive down wages. And if you look at the wages over the last like few decades, wages have not gone up proportional to inflation. Like inflation is like you know terrible right now.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
what that's doing is like people can afford less and less and less. They're making just as much money, but all of a sudden they're a lot poorer because their wages are not going up at that same rate because the corporations are megacorps are making sure that wages stay down so they can get more profits. They're getting more profits, but everybody else is poor. And I kind of realized I had this realization that like just because there's a lot of money doesn't mean that there's a lot of wealth.
Yeah.
When I was in San Francisco in like 2017, I'm originally from the Bay Area.
Oh wow.
Gotcha.
My
Okay.
dad was
Yeah.
Navy, so we ended up moving around a lot, and I ended up growing up mostly in Florida, but to the Bay Area for the summers because that's where a lot of my family still lived. And when the last time I was in San Francisco was 2017, and it was like a dead city. And I was talking to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, we can't even afford to like live in the city anymore." People are like out as far as like Davis, commuting into the Bay like every day, which is like a 2-hour drive. And I was like, "What?" But they're like these Silicon Valley companies are taking in like billions and trillions of dollars, and you're walking around the city and it feels like there's nobody there. Like it feels kind of dead. And
really,
except for
very
homeless
depressing
people.
case.
It's like it's super stratified. It's super stratified. And so I had that realization that just because there's a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of wealth. And and I think that it's going to get worse and worse with just how our society seems to be going. Is like, California is kind of the experiment, right, for the rest of America. That's kind of how it goes, right? Or
no, it's true.
we become a playground for the wealthy. Yeah.
No.
And the middle class just kind of ceases to exist.
Yeah,
completely.
absolutely.
Like what you mentioned about New Hollywood and how that was, a lot of people think of New Hollywood as being like a left-wing thing, if anything, but really what it was making, movies that were honest and about these issues that were affecting a new generation that were not spoken to by the older generation. And I do kind of view our position as analogous to that, and that we can make movies or podcasts or books or whatever, but art, or even just tweets, that kind of address these issues. And I think that's what's going on. People talk about vibe shift, whatever. Like, I think the reason this space is growing so much. What's
don't
that?
tell Barrett that you said the vibe shift. I said, don't tell Barrett you said vibe shift.
He hates that.
You know Barrett?
Sort of. Yeah,
well,
I know.
He
I know who he
coined
is.
it. Yeah. And I was just hanging out with his girlfriend works here in Austin. He lives here in Austin, but he's in LA right now.
Oh, is he? I'll DM him about our reading event then. Anyway.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, Barrett's an interesting person because he's a good friend of mine, and he's a Marxist. You know, like he's like totally like a Marxist, but he and I agree on a lot of things. He's he's in this dissident space, but you can't really categorize him into like any sort. You can't pigeonhole him into anything, and I like to feel like I'm also similar in that, like, I don't want to be pigeonholed as like, oh, he's like this oh, he's just this right wing guy, because people use that to brush you off, to be like, oh yeah, you're just this right wing guy, like or you're this left. I have plenty of people that think I'm a communist, and because I like Soviet propaganda. I'm like, well, they did propaganda really well. like I have to appreciate art when I see it, right?
Absolutely.
And, the Soviets made really good movies. And
I mean, there's a whole,
we can learn from this.
No, completely. I think there's a whole like little subculture within, like, of appreciating certain elements of the Soviet Union, right? I don't know, in terms of aesthetics or whatever, or even politically. The
aesthetics are absolutely beautiful, but also, like, I really look up to Pasolini. Actually, I have his poster. I'll show you.
Yeah, there we go.
Right now, I'm building out a studio right now, but this is for Oedipus Rex. So, you know, it's very very kinky photo right here. Him with his mom. He doesn't know it's his mom in that scene. You know, as the story goes.
Yeah.
But it's like you know, it's a whole diverse amount of diverse opinions, but the thing is that each of them feels I kind of don't like using this word, but I think it's apt, is transgressive. You know, like how Delicious Tacos talks about sex in like this kind of way that's this kind of way that like nobody even dares talk about it anymore.
Well, I think, and
graphic as he talks about it.
Yeah, I apologize for jumping in here, but I think that kind of like, if you are an artist, you will necessarily, in order to tell the truth, you will transgress, and transgression will impact the left and the right, because like if you have any ideological project, to some extent you're going to have to suppress certain truths about, you know, your agenda. And that is like something that if you are an ideologue first and you know, and an artist second, sure, that makes sense. Like you know, you should produce art that is more propagandistic, that celebrates what you want to celebrate and hides that which you want to hide. But like if you're an artist, well, like, you know, your first duty is to make good art. And that is something that, like, you know, I essentially
that
think
means self-reflection.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that means self-reflection, and that means being able to even say in your art, show in your art your own shortcomings, maybe in how you think about the world, and because how it should be, like when you're writing, is like a discovery. Like you go in there with your mindset. You're not going in there necessarily with an ideology, but you do have an ideology that maybe is subconscious or it's unconscious to you. And as you're discovering the story, you might have to go even against your own ideology and kind of muddy the waters.
Absolutely.
About like what the actual message is, because the world is more complex than just like this and that, you know, blah 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 blah. It's always murkier. And that's why I love Pasolini. He was an avowed Marxist, also like kind of a lapsed Roman Catholic, but still still really cherished his Catholicism. He was a Marxist who was pro-cop and anti-abortion. Like he was a walking contradiction in a lot of ways, but his contradictory aspects of him is what makes his movies, to me, I mean, other than just his filmmaking prowess, it makes his movies much more interesting, because it really feels like he's not taking it really from an ideological standpoint, but from
Mhm.
like this also a very self-reflective kind of and self-deprecating in a lot of ways, and it makes his movies feel a bit more esoteric, and they interact more with the viewer, because if a movie is like purely ideological, you're like, okay, I get it, like
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
this, like you know what I mean. But with those, it's more like, what was he going for here? Like, I can't quite pin it down, but then like the movie then kind of stays in
Like
your mind for a long time.
everyone knows when you're holding back. Everyone knows when you're just like there's
Hmm.
like a deeper thing, but you're like being like, nope, we're not going to talk about that. And
Mhm.
like you kind of
Yeah.
like for instance, you know, as much as I love like Top Gun, like those
Mhm.
types of movies are just very much like triumphalist, and that's great. I love it. But like, you know, there are certainly like aspects like if the characters were very seriously developed, you know, you would get into kind of things that are less heroic,
Yeah.
things that are more, you know, kind of
Yeah.
like, you know, messy. And, you know, that is
That's why I
kind of
really liked
where,
about The Northman.
oh,
Mhm.
sure, yeah,
That's why I really
that
liked
makes
about, sorry
sense.
to cut you off.
No,
I
no,
know I'm
no,
cutting
go
you
ahead.
off. Northman, it's like he you know, it is like this Viking revenge tale, and it is basic, and it is Hamlet. It's based on Amleth, Prince of Denmark, right? That Hamlet was based on.
Yeah.
But it's a mix of Amleth and like a whole bunch of Icelandic sagas, like the saga of Grettir the Strong and Herbicious
Mhm.
saga, and like all these different things kind of incorporated into the Northman. But I like Eggers didn't go for that kind of trite, oh, revenge is bad thing, because he does end up winning. He dies and goes to Valhalla at the end by getting revenge on Fenrir. Um, and but it is like totally messy, and he realizes his mom actually hated him the whole time, and he's doing all this
Yes.
for essentially not, but it's like, but he is on that quest, and he has to, out of honor to his dad, he has to fulfill this quest, you know, and he
Yeah.
Mhm.
does. And so it's like, it's like, yeah, he could probably have just like sailed away, but he knows that like that cycle of violence was just going to continue, so he had to basically kill everybody in that family to end that cycle of violence. And yeah, it's really messy, and it's really bloody, and and you're like, man, I wouldn't do this. But the thing that Eggers did with that, to his credit immensely, is that he wasn't looking at it, he wasn't looking at the story from a 21st century perspective. He was looking at it like from a 900 AD perspective. Like,
Mm.
what would they have considered honorable, and what would they have considered to be good? And like, he does some dishonorable actions, like when he kills Thorir in his bed, which is very like was very taboo, like killing somebody in their bed, you know, not in combat.
Mm.
um but you know, but he ends up doing the honorable action at the end of like fulfilling his revenge quest, and
Mhm.
Eggers is just showing it to us, and in this way it's like, yep, this is just this was the culture at the time, this is what they said was honorable, and he's like, and I'm not commenting on it, you know.
Yeah.
And that is, I like to sort of compare and contrast that to the Green Knight, which came out a couple years ago,
Right. Yeah. I
where
really saw. Yeah.
uh David Lowery definitely, he took the Arthurian legend, the epic poem of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight,
Mm.
and he totally transforms it because he's looking at it from a 21st century perspective, and it completely, in my mind, taints the material, because it's not true, and it doesn't really get to any truth other than a kind of this like 2020s nihilism, which is like, honestly, I don't like it, but it's like, I don't like nihilism on for a lot of reasons, but it's also just like, come on, man, this is so passe now. Like
Yeah.
nihilism's done. You know, like it's passe. Like even my script, it might seem, because I'm only on page 50 of the script, it might seem nihilistic now. I think though that near the end of the work in progress, you kind of see where it starts to shift into kind of an anti-nihilist.
I
I
think
wanted
so,
to show the
yeah.
nihilism of that character. Yeah, I wanted to show the nihilism of that character and where it leads him to. And but I and then like the second half is going to be more like if the first half is he's like the nihilist, right? The second half is going to be like the Sun and Steel, you know, sort of
Yeah,
character
completely.
that
Yeah.
he's kind of
The whole
making of
incel arc,
himself,
as it were.
Yeah.
yeah, the gym becomes a gym cell, watches Yukio Mishima perform
Completely.
harakiri in front of the Japanese army.
Cuts out seed oils, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, cuts out. I don't. I like. I'm really trying to ride a thin line where I'm not going totally into meme territory. Of like, I need to keep this like realistic to a person like this, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm like, and maybe the seed oil thing like isn't gonna. That'll. I mean, maybe by the time
what
that the
I think you should show him doing,
film
you should
comes out,
show him
that meme will be
slonking.
done.
You should show him slonking eggs.
Rocky
Slonking
That's-
Balboa.
eggs.
Yeah.
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 I mean, like, I feel like that is something that's really catching on.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Rocky,
that's like, and it's
Rocky slunked eggs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like it's a very, and also it's just like
Yeah.
a very visual thing. To slonk an egg, that's just like
Yeah.
that captures very well on film, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
like
eggs
cutting
just-
out
it's
seed
just
oils is just
texture
kind
and
of
color.
like he's at the supermarket and he's like, no seed oil, okay. But like slonking eggs is just like
It's not really a
slonk some-
visual thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And initially the script was going to be kind of nihilistic because I was feeling very, I forget what happened. I think it was the Nashville shooting.
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
Nashville? It
That's
was
certainly
Tennessee shooting.
something Nashville it was, yeah. The one
Yeah,
by
and
the
I remember I was feeling very kind of like,
man.
I remember I was feeling so depressed after watching the body cam footage and seeing the dead kids in the hallway, and like for me that is like crimes against children. I like it really gets to me. And I was feeling, and I was like, no, like this movie's gonna be like, I was feeling very, very cynical because of that. And so initially I was taking a direction, and as I started writing it, I was like, well, you know, maybe I don't need to add to the cynicism. Like, it's like, why feast, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can write about nihilism without writing from nihilism, or without espousing nihilism. And I think it's important to write from a place of understanding of nihilism without necessarily fully falling into it.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of the people I know are inherently nihilistic, even if they don't necessarily like understand what nihilism is. It's just, that's just our culture. That's just
mentioned earlier, completely friend of the pod, I'm sure someone who you're somewhat familiar with, at least, Catherine D. She was on a couple episodes ago. Wrote a really great piece for Pedro Gonzalez's newsletter. I don't remember what's on my head, but it's called Mass Shootings in the World Liberalism Made. And she actually talked about that piece with Tucker. Like, that's when she went on Tucker Carlson Today or whatever. That's what he wanted to talk about. And it's a fantastic piece that I think sums up something that a lot of people instinctually know, which is that any other issue you want to talk about, mass shootings, from guns to mental health, is one thing, but what really underlies it all is this culture of nihilism, which is kind of like the air we breathe, the water that we swim in as fish, so to speak. And I do believe that, without being too pessimistic, because I'm optimistic about some things, but I do think there's a nihilism that isn't just a subcultural nihilism. It is a mainstream meaninglessness thing in our culture.
Yeah. And I want to even get back to like New Hollywood about this, because there are some like I've seen some people call like Taxi Driver nihilistic, but if you really watch the movie, it's actually not.
No, no.
He does save the day, and he does save this child who's been trafficked, and he does become like
And
this
hero,
average
yeah.
Joe does become the hero, and he realizes, to his credit, he realizes that assassinating Palantine is only going to create more chaos, and that he can use this rage or this wish to sort of make his place better, not by killing somebody who's honestly going to be replaced with another puppet or another just like corrupt politician, but to save somebody and reunite a family. And that's how Taxi Driver ends, is he does reunite the family. And I know that some people go like, oh, he couldn't have gotten away with it. It's like, that was New York in the 70s, dude. Like he would be a New York hero.
Exactly.
He like killed his, and then
yeah.
saved
I mean, like
being trafficked.
Daniel Penny
of course people are gonna call
in the
him a hero.
70s. Yeah. Daniel
of
Penny in
course.
the 70s would have been a hero.
Yeah.
But you know, it's only like today where I was gonna say that like watching your Taxi Driver video, it would indeed have been a very different movie if the kind of antagonists, if you were you know, of that specific demographic that you mentioned. It would have, you know, certainly.
Yeah, like they were in the original script.
Been viewed very differently. Where Matt, we're talking about if Taxi Driver had had antagonists as it was in the original script of a certain demographic, as opposed to whites who are the antagonists in the actual.
That was in the original version of the script. I didn't realize that.
Apparently, yes.
Not surprised.
Yeah, it was. It was actually pretty smart on Scorsese's part for changing that, because it's given the movie more lasting power. And
absolutely.
Like, yeah.
And I don't think it's like
people can talk about these same issues.
Yeah, I don't think some like atrocious censorship where it completely changes the message or anything. I just think that maybe the latter would have probably been more realistic to the times, if we're being honest. But yeah.
The interesting thing though was Betsy supposed to be African American? The Sybil Shepherd.
She was supposed to be African American.
Okay. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
I think
sport,
that the only
clearly. Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it was just like all the people at the whorehouse.
Okay, I see.
Who were supposed to be that.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
My lingering thought.
It was smart on Scorsese. Yeah, it was smart on Scorsese for casting like guys. I mean, Harvey Keitel also was like known for like Mean Streets at that time, making it more like Italian mafia sort of thing.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
Interesting. My lingering thought on nihilism and Taxi Driver is that it was of course written by Paul Schrader, and I was just going to say I think Paul Schrader is a great example. I mean, he writes that sort of what I've written about this. Like, I don't want to call it calling it the incel narrative as I think reductive, because I think it's more than just people who aren't getting laid. But I do think it's that narrative.
Travis Bickle has great riz.
Yeah,
Travis
great.
Bickle has great riz.
Riz, I'm not familiar with this.
Oh, Riz is a kind of like vaguely Zoomer term for charisma.
There you go.
Slang,
okay. Well, I'm going to start using that immediately. But he does, and other characters in others of his movies, get laid plenty, including like Richard Gere in American Gigolo is even he's the opposite of an incel, but it's all this isolated male protagonist improving himself. Like that's what you see in every fucking Paul Schrader movie, from Taxi Driver, everything he wrote from Taxi Driver to First Reformed in different ways. And what I really want to say is that what's that? Oh, definitely Card Counter. And I haven't seen Master of the Gardener yet, but probably in the same vein. He's not a nihilistic filmmaker, is what I'm really trying to say. He's not. It's the opposite. He's a very Christian filmmaker in some ways, and he deals with nihilism. He deals with men dealing with darkness and nihilism, but they always find some profound sense of purpose in the end. even if they're committing violence. But usually, yeah, it's a profound sense of purpose, and usually to morally good end. I mean, Rough Sleeper is another example of this, or Light Sleeper, I think it's called. These are isolated men. They're anti-heroes. They do morally questionable things sometimes, but typically there's that final shot where it's like, oh, you reunited my family. Oh, you killed this woman who's antagonizing my sister. It's always something like that. It's very moral, very moral.
Well, like in the Card Counter, he doesn't even murder Willem Dafoe. He does the game of stat, like what's it's like the game that they had.
Yeah,
or
some
whatever.
I
type
don't
of
remember, but yeah,
special
it's
forces
to-
game where they like go like shot for shot or something like
Mhm.
that. And like
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's
Willem
like shot
Dafoe
for shot.
lost and he won. But yeah, like clearly
Yeah.
it wasn't,
But
it was
he
like
does
to
an
the
honorable-
end, an honorable masculine, duel, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, I think that a lot of this, like, Paul Schrader stuff even is encapsulated in one of my favorite of his directorial movies, which is Mishima, A Life in Four
Good one.
Chapters.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, and it's like he does lose in the end with his, I mean, it's based on a true story. So,
Right.
with his
Well, that's what's
trying
interesting
to-
about Mishima is like that's where it really happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Paul Schrader is a total weeaboo, and his brother Leonard lived in Japan. I think he has a Japanese wife. He might still live in Japan. I'm not sure. So that Paul Schrader was definitely very influenced by Mishima, just as a writer. He's also very influenced by, Bresson, Tarkovsky, and Ozu, because he wrote that book on transcendental cinema. And like, there's like this, and there's like a meme with Paul Schrader is that he always has the pickpocket ending. So if you've ever seen the movie Pickpocket by Bresson, it ends with the pickpocket is like this very loose adaptation of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And it ends with the main character on one side of the jail, and he's talking to his girlfriend at the time, and they touch the fingers on, they touch each other's fingers. And if you watch Paul Schrader, he ends a lot of his movies
at least like 5 of them. Yeah. It's funny. People don't talk about that enough. Like we don't realize the extent. And even the ones that don't literally end like that, it's still the same beat. Like in First Reform, they kiss or whatever. Like it's more intense, but it's still the same. Coming together of male and female.
It's
typically.
the same. Yeah. And talking about Bresson, Bresson made a great movie on nihilism, and people think that the movie itself is nihilistic, but it's really about nihilistic youth of France in the 60s and 70s. And spoiler alert, it's called The Devil Probably, and it has a great ending. So the main character is completely nihilist, decides that like the only thing left for him is to die, but he can't bring himself to kill himself. So he goes to a graveyard, he gives a gun to his friend, and it's like, I'm gonna walk, and as I'm walking away, I want you to shoot me. So as he's walking away, his friend brings up the gun, and then the main character says, wait, but the guy's already pulling the trigger, and he shoots him, he's dead. Right. And that's how the movie ends. And it's like, wait, it's like he didn't realize that there was actually a reason to live until basically it was too late.
Yeah.
And in that moment, like the movie becomes like and it's one of my favorite endings, I think, to any movie ever, is in The Devil Probably. But Paul Schrader definitely like takes a lot from that, from that director, especially Bresson, who was a very Christian filmmaker, actually. Like he was quite, if you haven't like watched any of his movies, I would definitely
I haven't,
I have not either.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another
start with A Man Escaped.
Man Escaped.
Okay.
Maybe start with
Then-
Pickpocket or A Man Escaped.
Yeah, maybe Pickpocket to get that Schrader
And then
beat that I didn't even realize came from someone
Yeah.
else. That's amazing. I mean, that's another new Hollywood
Yeah.
element, right? Is to kind of take this European influence, right?
Yeah, because they were all like film students who became. It was like the first generation of basically film students. Because if you
Yeah.
think about like the directors who came out and before that, a lot of them were like uneducated. Or maybe they
Mhm.
had education in other places. Bresson was a painter. He was a painter who only like kind of late in his life, when he was like 40, switched over to film during World War II, because he said that painting, he saw painting as being like, or fine arts as being sort of like something that was done. I think he said that Cézanne sort of pushed painting to what it could be, and he's like, I can't like expand off of that, because it's going to become like nonsense now. Which he was pretty right. Like almost all the fine art that I like is pre mid 20th century. I don't really care for any. I don't care for much art after that. It's either like redoing things that have already been done, or it's in such this abstract direction that I think it loses a lot or all meaning.
Totally. Yeah.
I've understood a lot of the I've dived into like Rothko and like all these artists.
Sure.
Like I understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that I necessarily like their work.
Yeah.
But what Bresson was doing, what Tarkovsky was doing, and what a lot of these like mid 20th century directors were doing, Orson Welles too, was like trying to figure out like what is cinema? How do we actually define this as an art form? A lot of the French New Wave directors were doing this too. Bresson's not French New Wave. He started 20 years before the French New Wave was even a thing. But the French New Wave definitely took a lot of inspiration from Bresson. They saw him as like one of their mentors. And then New Hollywood, they saw Orson Welles as like their big mentor, but also the French New Wave. And Orson Welles had been sort of blacklisted from Hollywood for quite some time, had been living in Europe. And but there was definitely a revival. Like you see, Peter Bogdanovich was who's a major New Hollywood director, was also Orson Welles' biographer. So they took a lot from these directors, and they were like the first like students of cinema. Actually, a great movie that you guys should watch that's from Peter Bogdanovich is called Nickelodeon.
Yeah, it's one I've never seen.
It came out in 75, I think. And it stars Ryan O'Neal. It was panned upon release, but thankfully last year here in Austin, Richard Linklater presented it right after Peter Bogdanovich's death. And it's about like the birth of cinema, and it's very funny. It's definitely not politically correct in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of a love letter to the birth of cinema. It's a much better movie about early cinema than say Babylon. Was to me was like a movie about a guy making a movie about parties, a guy who's never been to a party making a movie about parties.
Makes sense.
But yeah, so these directors definitely took from a lot of like the earlier directors who they thought were interesting. They were sort of also recontextualizing a lot of movies that maybe people had slept on, like with the Cahiers du Cinema in the 50s, all the French directors like Godard and Truffaut and Malle and Romer. They created the term film noir, because before that, it was just, there's the B gumshoe movies, right? It's just the
film noir elevates that to an artistic
just B movies
genre.
Yeah, and I think that we're sort of in a similar place now, where we can kind of elevate movies that are seen as like not as good, or at least not as worthy of like being seen as artistic, but also use that kind of going forward to say like this is like the new film canon moving forward. And that's kind of what I try to do on my channel is, but it's also like look, but there's always this like forward looking aspect to it as well, which is what New Hollywood had, which is what the Nouvelle Vague had, which is what a lot of these great movements in film had, is that they recontextualize films, but also use that to move forward and create a new genre that actually spoke to newer audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's I think we're in a prime spot to do that, just because like mainstream Hollywood now just kind of sucks. Like,
Absolutely.
I saw Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
3, and I knew that dude, they fucking
Ah.
opened up Guardians of the Galaxy 3 with the acoustic version of Creep. I'm like,
Oh my
choose
God, it's
any
like it's so
Radiohead
Reddit,
song.
so cringe. Yeah,
I know you could choose like Radiohead has so many good songs, and he fucking chose Creep. Like
that's terrible.
you don't choose like fake, like if you're in the 90s, like you have OK Computer, right? You have the
Yeah.
Bends, you have like two amazing albums from the 90s. If you want to go with 90s Radiohead, you have like The Tourists, you have Fake Plastic Trees, you have Street Spirit, Fade Out, you have Paranoid Android, like all these like
Just
actually
completely
great songs.
lazy
Actually, the funniest,
decision making. Or is it
yeah,
lazy, or it's
exactly.
just so hopelessly mainstream and muted and wanting to appeal, not daring. I mean, I have no doubt actually the intention was we need to put a song in here that everyone knows.
Well, I think it's like
Yeah.
partly you have to select it at the right moment. Like everyone knows the Pixies song at the end of Fight Club, but it was so perfect, it just made
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah,
like
and
that's okay. But when you're just kind of using a song that everyone knows as a way to kind of like introduce everyone and get them on board with the film,
sentimental.
that's setting
Yeah.
the wrong tone.
Yeah.
I would say.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
props to you for
And it's
having the
like,
fortitude to
it's
even
so
go and see the
sentimental.
new Guardians. Yeah.
I kind of, I went and saw it out of a sort of morbid curiosity.
Sure.
And I think that like I pointed this on my Letterboxd review. I actually didn't hate the movie. I thought it was better than most Marvel movies, but like that's still saying like
Yeah,
it's,
I mean, at least
good.
it's original in a
None
way.
of them none. Yeah, at least it doesn't have other like cape shit people in it or whatever. But like, it's something that kind of got me about like maybe the morals of the film, or like the sentimentality of the movie, is that you see an entire like planet. So literally, like the bad guy is the Chud Jack, billions must die guy, and he kills an entire what they call counter Earth. So you have like a total genocide of like all the people on this planet, and it's just shrugged off, and it's like, oh no, but we're gonna have like this moment where you have to feel sentimental about like them saving a few animals from the spaceship, but it's like, but they just failed to like save billions of people. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of shown as like, oh, it's just an action set piece, like all these like billions and billions of people dying, which to me, I was like, that seems like that just seems so strange and so wrong.
Completely.
But yeah, as far, so I think we wanted to talk about a few other things.
We did want to jump into
here.
If you had a chance to watch it, Bolt Driver. Yes, no?
Oh yeah, the kind of student film remake of Taxi Driver in LA.
Yeah.
I watched
Did you,
it.
I
watched
oh, you
it
watched it. Okay, cool. Yeah. No, I mean like it seems to kind of hit on a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, in that like it is, like
I do think it kind of misunderstood Travis Bickle though.
Fair enough.
I did think
we
it
can
kind of
talk about that.
misunderstood Travis Bickle.
I mean, I think to an extent it's trying to be a literally me movie. It certainly is like playing with
Yeah,
not playing with it is like an incel movie. And I'm confident
just
that
beat for
the
beat
more
Taxi
kind of
Driver.
like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm confident that the more, you know, trad elements of right wing art would say, in certain respects, it is a bit quote unquote degenerate. So, like, this kind of like hits on a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, which is one of the reasons why I thought it
Well,
would be, in addition to Matt having written a very incisive review of the film. So,
I think that I think that the degeneracy actually in sexiness is something that people, especially in our dissident sphere, should sort of strive to reincorporate, because something I've complained about this
absolutely.
a lot on Twitter, of how movies just aren't sexy anymore. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is like you see more nudity actually probably and maybe even more sex scenes in film and television than you have like in the past. Although that's been kind of going down. Like you don't see as much, but
Yeah,
it's
I think
not
it peaked
played
like 10 years
for
ago or
any
something.
kind of it's not played for any kind of like uh but it's not played for like sexiness or anything. And what I mean by sexiness is not just like, oh, I want more boobs in films, which, of course every man
That's a
wants more
fine
boobs in
desire, but
film.
yeah.
Like, oh, okay, like,
Well,
yeah.
I think I
But
know
it's also
exactly
just like
what you mean.
how
In that, like, the sex
it's like
scenes that they show
Cary
are
Grant was
now
sexy.
like like they like showing cock, basically. They like showing like flaccid like
Yeah.
men changing cock as a way of kind of like, well, we're showing male full frontal, so we're
Oh
woke
yeah, it's a
or
big thing.
whatever. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like it's not like, look, I'm not into that stuff, not my thing. But I'm pretty sure that like women aren't like, oh, that's a hot flaccid
Yeah.
cock. No, they're not like, that's not something that like
Yeah.
women are like really like, or even gay men are just like, if you want it to be
No, it's
sexy
like
or whatever.
anti-sexy. Like
Yeah, the male
penises.
member is supposed to be hard.
Like
That's when
the
it
thing
looks
is
good.
like
So like, but they're not, willing to show that, obviously. So like they kind of like to compromise on this like version of like, we're going to show sex scenes, but because we're woke, we're not going to show naked women, which everyone wants to see, and we're going to show soft cock, which no one really wants to see. So that's kind of like
yeah.
where I think we find
Yeah.
ourselves right
And
now in
I would
movies
even say
today.
that, yeah. I would even say that like, the implied sex scenes from like the 40s and 50s of like Humphrey Bogart and Cary Grant like are sexier than the sex scenes that involve maybe partial nudity today, because
Yeah, yeah,
the
Completely.
actors actually had chemistry. The actors were good looking. They were shot in such a way that's like seductive. And it's like the ending of North by Northwest where he's seducing the woman in the train, and then it literally you see the train going into the tunnel. To me, that's
yeah, yeah.
sexier than like some like sexier than anything in girls, like for sure. It's sexier than most sex scenes now, even though you don't really see anything. The 70s were, I mean, the movies were, very sexy. I mean, Shampoo is a good example of like a
Mhm.
very sexy movie. Um, and deals a lot with sexuality, and where Warren Beatty basically plays as like a hoe. He's like
Yeah.
he's the and but just all of his interactions, it's not just down to, oh, more boobs. It's also like having on film like this kind of seductive
Actual
atmosphere. And I
fucking
feel like now
energy.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, energy between the actors where you're like, oh, it's intoxicating to watch. And now it feels like sex in movies, when I see it, is somebody wrote, it was Isaac who wrote this thing about sex scenes in
Yeah,
movies now are
No doubt. Yeah.
cringe.
yeah, he did.
um and it's because that energy just isn't there, and it feels like the sexual aspects of a lot of these new movies just feel kind of lifeless.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think
like
it's
this friction. It's like just friction.
it might be a more general sexlessness, so I don't want to be overly reductive, but I think in a lot of ways it is the muting of the masculine energy that people
Yeah,
are
because
afraid
it's
of
like that's
post-media.
problematic these days. But that, in fact, is what is the basis of human sexuality.
It
It's
is.
men
It's the
pursuing
initial
and it's
spark.
women
Yeah.
submitting. And if you like remove women submitting and men pursuing from film, it just becomes kind of denuded. It becomes, denatured. And so you have like, you have the kind of soft
Yeah.
cock sex scenes that we have today of like men changing, and it's like
Exactly.
great,
Yeah.
great. No one fucking cares about seeing some guys, flaccid dick flopping around. That's just not hot. Like it's hot, like even if you don't see any nudity, a man kind of
Very Grant.
overpowering and
Yeah.
taking a woman. And like that's hot.
Like
But
Casablanca is
like
a sexy movie.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But like
Casablanca is a sex. And actually, so I'm coming out with a video next week. It might be out by the time this is. I don't know. I'm coming out with a video like next week ish, depending upon how fast I can edit it. Where I talk to a YouTuber friend of mine. Shout out to Meat Canyon. About a movie called Angel Heart and 80s Mickey Rourke. Like
I've heard of that one.
Throughout the entire movie, Mickey Rourke is like he's hitting on literally trying to seduce literally every woman in the movie. There's only one sex scene, and the one sex scene is played for like kind of it's like a nightmare sex scene. It turns violent, which in itself like is kind of sexy. But it's sexy just throughout it, just because of Mickey Rourke's energy and playing off of the women who you feel like those women are actually very much like falling in love with him, or maybe they're not falling in love with him, but he's really trying.
Well, that's why I would suggest that 80s movies are much hotter, the sex scenes, than like, and maybe Isaac got into this. I haven't read that article yet. Than today's sex scenes, because they do they're pre-woke. So they have like men, dominating women, which is what is generally hot. I mean, like, yes, there are kind of variations on that. Everyone has their kinks, but like certainly the kind of like sex scenes of today, which are more like just denatured. They're just
it's funny.
kind of deracinated from anything that is like true or real.
Yeah. Huh.
Leave it to a gay guy to really understand heterosexual sex.
Mm-hmm.
For my Martyrs video, I read the book by Georges Bataille.
Yeah.
And he has this, and he talks about sex and violence. That's pretty much like the whole book is talking about sex and violence and all sorts of different kinds of violence, like cannibalism and whatnot. But he had this passage in there where he says that like talking about human sacrifice and talking about like pagan rituals, pagan sexual rituals and what like basically the impact of sacrificing an animal or sacrificing a human. And then he relates that to sex, and he says that essentially what sex is that the woman is the sacrifice, the man is the sacrificer. I mean, it's a very like maybe it's like leave it to Georges Bataille to describe it like that, but there is a truth in that where it is the man is acting on the woman in sex. I mean, just from biological stance, right?
Yeah.
And it is like that almost, and like it is like almost a ritualistic, or like if the sex is good, right? If the sex is bad, it's just like it's like two people just kind of rubbing on each other for a few minutes.
It's purely mechanical. But yeah,
I mean, it's purely mechanical. Yeah. But if the sex is good, there is like a religious aspect to it. There is like
of surrender,
religious or spiritual aspect to it, of surrendering and of like sacrificing. And I think that's kind of and that's been lost in a lot of sex scenes now, where it's like you don't get that feeling of like that submission or that sort of. It's not like they're trying to show sex scenes to sort of be like, oh yeah, these people had sex and now they're in a relationship or something like that. It's like very kind of banal, and I'm not
Completely
sure that
muted,
it's
yeah.
just because it's not. I'm not sure that it's just because movies have like tried to censor themselves to go down this way. I actually don't think that's the case. I think it's just that sex scene is something that's very much more casual than it,
Sex has
like
been has
people
lost
are
its
still having
power,
a lot of sex. People were having more sex in the '80s than they are having now,
for sure.
but there was still this kind of cultural um, idea that it was something that was like uh, there was something more
Powerful.
to it than just
Yeah. Yeah.
friction.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a really
You
interesting
know, which anybody who's had sex knows that that's the case, unless I don't know, you have like this like body count of I don't know 100 or something, and you're just like, oh yeah, it's basically just like making out. Like
Yeah.
it's not, but you know, you can. It's like a desensitization. Being like it's like the culture at large is desensitized to sex, so that no longer holds like this kind of power in essence. When in reality, it's like the power that sex has is something that is it's very powerful when it does hold that power, and if you can interpret that into art, it becomes very alluring, and it becomes very alluring and becomes something that you really want to watch because
Exactly.
it's like you kind of you want to like a good sex scene should make you feel like on like like I talked about this with Asher quite a bit, but you know a good sex scene should turn you on, but it should also be like I shouldn't be watching this. Like I feel like
Yeah, yeah.
these two people are having this
Absolutely.
intimate moment, and like I'm this like voyeur. I'm like this. I'm not a part of this. I feel like I shouldn't be watching this. But also, you know, and it has that like transgressive element, like giving you that feeling almost like you're in your apartment building and you're looking out the windows, you know, at the neighboring apartment building, and you see it happening, and you're like, oh wow, I should look away. But on the
Yeah, yeah.
movie, you
No, I
can't,
mean like
you know.
the increasingly not permissive, but yes permissive, but just the like the omnipresence of, I certainly am not a unmitigated foe of pornography, but like the fact that it is all on demand whenever you want. And indeed like sex, depending on your, I mean very much depending on your demographic and your income and whatever, is like also increasingly more on demand in big cities. It um it loses a portion of its mystique, and that is
Yeah,
something that I think like actually I would argue that, and you might think otherwise, but I would argue that American Pie was sexy. I would argue that like this kind of like this idea that like he has this foreign exchange student who he's creeping on, and
Mhm.
these like horny high school guys, just like American Pie was made in an era kind of before like widespread internet porn. Like yes, there was internet porn, but there wasn't like
yeah,
high speed streaming video. It was kind of like where you did have this kind of like fascination on the female form, on like and
yeah.
I
How are you
don't
gonna have sexy movies? Yeah, how are you gonna have sexy movies when people can just look up whatever fetish they're
exactly
into
exactly
or whatever on the internet all the time? And and that's what I mean. Like, how do we make movies sexy again? Is like, for one, have actually good actors who have lots of charisma that are able to get across this mystique, because like none of this porn has any good writing or good actors, and there's no mystique to it. It's literally just mechanical, um,
yeah
and you know, and it's like making it more human or making it more human than human in essence. You know, it's like you would rather watch like the Greek gods seducing one another than watching some woman who is probably a drug addict, you know, like,
yeah
or no, I'm not gonna say it's probably a drug addict, but like
well
some, you know, so, yeah, highly likely, just getting railed by some random dude, and there being like really nothing else to it. Like there's so much more to human sexuality than just putting penis in vagina. Like there's so much more. There's so much more to it, and in fact, like the sex aspect of it should come as the pun intended climax of a long seduction of like, and the seduction itself is actually the seduction aspect of it, the flirtation, the sort of back and forth, the kind of getting closer. That actually to me is like sexier than the actual sex scene. It's like it's like that's just what happens after, and
the moment of surrender.
And that's what a lot of older movies did so well. That's what older movies did so well that you don't really see now. It's like, oh, we're just gonna casually have sex and then like get back to it, like in our New York NYU film movies, and it's like in fact there's like and I was talking to Asher about this, like how do you make stuff like transgressive within that sexuality, and like the movie from last year that's sort of struck as like having this kind of sexuality that is transgressive and how they do it was Bones and All, which
I haven't seen it yet, but I want to.
And it's kind of like Badlands. It's a lot like Badlands, but the couple on the run, or you could maybe even liken it to Rockies, like the Doom Generation, or to True Romance, but they're cannibals, and the actual cannibal aspect of it also like that kind of violence aspect of it to it also makes it a little bit sexier. I mean, like there's a reason why Badlands is so sexy, because they're criminals and they're serial killers.
Yeah. No, completely. It's it's amazing how that libidinal energy has just dried up so much in society at large and in cinema.
It's just become like, it's like the libido, or that kind of energy has just become kind of neutered, and it's just, it's like movies are like, as I said, you don't even have to have a sex scene. Like I just want characters to be like, there's something about seeing somebody blown up on the big screen, and you're feeling like you're watching not an actor, not a person, but some sort of like mythical figure. And it's, a reflection of like an ideal in a sense. And of course, like, with the script that I'm writing, none of the characters are like ideal or anything, and it's definitely not a sexy movie, so maybe I'm a hypocrite for doing that. But I am also developing a movie that I hope is
sexier,
very sexy. I don't know if Dan sent you the treatment.
He sent me the script.
I'm gonna write this after I finish writing.
Is there a treatment too?
No, so there's a treatment for a different script.
Gotcha.
But I'll wait till he gets back. But yeah, no, it's
I'd love to check it out.
I mean, I can rant about about all this stuff, and really what it comes down to is what I don't like in a lot of this sort of modern dissidence. Like I'm liking that there are now movies that I'm liking that there's now art that's being made, because like for a few years it was just like reactionary. It was just people tweeting. It was just people saying like this all sucks and blah 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 blah. Like, but nothing was being made to sort of replace what was seen as like the problem. Right? Disney was still dominating the market. It was still like all this like PG stuff. It was still all this like very anti-transgressive stuff. It was like, nothing was really being made to offset that and to sort of say this is what we want to do instead. And then and the really cringe thing was who beat everybody to the punch was the fucking Daily Wire, and their movies are terrible. And I just don't,
they had money,
I just don't
so
buy
I think that's
into,
why. But yeah
well, they had lots of oil money, and I just don't buy into the whole like like Bush era conservatism or
Oh, for
anything
sure
like
not.
that. Like to me,
It's a step backward as well.
I just think
Yeah.
that's cringe, and they are, and the thing is, they're just as censorious as anybody else. Like I don't think any of my shit, like they would approve of any of my shit. And
No, I
it's
don't think
because
so.
it's like, oh no, you have to play to our suburban housewife demographic, and it's like, well, I don't want to fucking do that. Like
Yeah,
I want
no.
this, I want like 19 and 20-year olds, who I want like edgy kids to watch my stuff. I want people like across the political spectrum who just feel like there's something wrong with the world and they can't put their finger on it, and they might have an idea of it, but they feel they feel it and they need something that speaks to them. I'd rather go to that rather than try to play for a bunch of boomers.
Mhm. I think
Yeah.
that demographic is
But
like
yeah, no,
exploding right now too.
yeah.
Like that, there's so many people who are just like what you described, and many of them young, many of them Zoomers, people who are disaffected. And it's not that they're right wing; it's just that they're disaffected with everything, kind of culturally and politically, and they're hungry. They're hungry for like in-person events, which is a lot more of. They're hungry for films, which are being made, books which are being written. It's really
All
good.
of our NPC shows sell out.
Yeah.
All
I
of our
bet.
NPC
Yeah.
shows sell out. Like, and it's not just it's like, and it's a good mix of people from every walk of life, and is people who are like disaffected, people who feel like they want to become part of something that actually is going to speak to them. And I think what a lot of mainstream studios don't understand is that they've gone so far into idpol where they think that you can see yourself in a character if it's the same race or gender or sexual orientation as you.
Mhm.
And that's that's not the case at all. Like I can watch a movie like Deep Cover where the main character is Lawrence Fishburne. Great movie, by the way. And the fact that he's a black guy in LA doesn't stop me from doesn't stop me from really connecting with that character. I can watch a movie about a gay guy, and I'm not gay, but if the movie's done really well, that doesn't stop me from connecting with that character.
Yeah.
If it's a woman,
Yeah.
I'd say that probably Aliens is mostly a male fan base, but Ripley is like, she's a woman. I mean, and Sigourney Weaver was also hot, and man, Aliens is a sexy movie, and
Yeah.
and that doesn't stop men from the thing is like they think on such a surface level perspective of like, oh, we're gonna get people to sympathize with this character, to relate to this character because they have the same skin color, or they like to fuck the same kind of people, or they have the same genitalia. And it's like, no, that's like, you're totally missing the point. It's it's like, I know tons of black guys that love Taxi Driver. They don't care that Travis Bickle's a white dude.
I think what we're drilling down into
that doesn't matter.
It's the difference between art and propaganda. And indeed, kind of like propaganda on the left, idpol stuff, propaganda on the right, Daily Wire stuff. If you want to make real art, you're not going to be at home in either world, just because what you're saying will kind of trip up the censors on either side. So, yeah, it's just kind of like real art is going to piss people off.
Yeah, it's going to piss people off. But I was telling Matt, that about the treatment that I sent you for, probably it's going to be just as controversial of a film if I get it made, which is the work
Obsession.
in progress title. I'm terrible at choosing titles. Is Aphrodite.
Oh, all right, Aphrodite.
And that's like
sure.
I think that's tight. Yeah.
Reply. That's from my reply to movies not being sexy, and the whole point of it too is that the woman is being stalked, and it's kind of like, have you seen Michael Haneke's Cachet?
Yes, I actually
It's
have.
similar. Yeah, and you know, and where they kind of freak out that somebody is like videotaping their house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I was like, what if I do this in kind of a like almost like Jess Franco erotica kind of way, right?
Hmm.
And so she actually, and Dario Argento, like it's very like Giallo influenced, because I love Italian Giallo movies.
Yeah.
I think actually after we finish this, I'm gonna watch this movie called Vampiros Lesbos, which is the Jess Franco movie.
Okay, sounds cool.
But I like I love that, I love that shit. But the whole thing is like this, you know, it's like this weird sort of cult that's like actually not a cult. They're like actors. Like I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Grotowski, the Polish theater director in the 60s,
No.
who
No.
like basically he was doing experimental theater. So he was doing experimental theater, and he very much influenced the stylings of the director Andrei Zhuovsky, who did Possession and Le Note Bleu, and The Most Important Thing Is Love, and On a Silver Globe, and all these films. One of my favorite directors. But Grotowski would basically take, if you actually want to learn a lot about Grotowski, you got to watch the movie My Dinner with Andre, because they talk
I've
about
heard of that,
Grotowski
of
at
course.
length
Yeah.
Yeah.
in that film. Yeah. And he would take actors out into like the woods, and they would basically perform for no one, but they would do these like weird acting exercises, and they would kind of like it was very strange, and they would like kind of become their characters, and they would have to like emote with their body and their soul essentially, so you get like this almost like hysterical sort of style of acting from his stuff. But I was kind of like inspired by that, but I was like, what if it's like this bacchanalian cult that, you know, were outlawed and under Rome, because it was like these women and some men who would, you know, be like debaucherous, and they would supposedly, you know, kill people, sometimes eat people, and you know, and it was like this total just like submission to all of their vices. And I believe that at a certain point you had to get a permit from Rome to even have a sculpture of Bacchus or in a bacchanalian cult in a sense, and it was because it was a big problem. And so it's like a bacchanalian cult somewhere in like Montenegro, you know, like very early sort of, you know, where there's all sorts of Roman ruins and everything. And but they're not actually this like 2,000-year-old bacchanalian cult. They're like actors who are sort of playing into this. And she's like this dime square type e-girl who's very sort of sex positive and everything. And when she goes on this vacation, she starts getting stalked by this person who's taking more, like the photos that she's being sent are get more and more intimate, and it actually just turns her on.
Yeah.
And she plays into it, and then things start getting nasty, and then it starts becoming like Giallo horror until you get to like the big set piece at the end. But I actually set that treatment because I was like, okay, I have to see if like this plays with women who kind of inspired, you know, or who I kind of see as like semi inspirations for like the main character. Yeah. So I sent it to some e-girl friends of mine, some e-girls who are very like sex positive kind of e-girls, or you know, they might have OnlyFans or something like that. And I basically got the green light when one of them got back to me and said, "This is my fantasy." And I was like, "Oh,
wow, okay,
all right."
Yeah. No, perfect. That's
yeah, no, I mean that sounds like a very good plot,
and
a very good, you know, very.
I definitely want to check out the
so to say.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write it after I finish writing this script. I actually wrote this script mainly just because I was kind of having writer's block with the script for that, and I was like, I gotta write something else that I can do on a smaller budget and shoot here in Austin. But I'll write that probably this summer. And but yeah, no, like, and that's, and as, but talking about like how people are now like making art rather than just reacting to uh products that are being put out by the mainstream. Like you see Betsy Brown and Peter Vack,
Yep. Yeah, I just saw
and
their
Dasha
movie
putting
in
out their
LA. Yeah.
actors.
I saw,
Is
yeah,
it
they had a
actors that you
double
saw?
feature of assholes and actors. I enjoyed both.
Okay. I haven't seen Assholes yet. I saw
It's
actors.
good. Yeah.
I really liked actors.
Yeah.
You know, I think that all the people that were trying to shut it down, like, it's so obvious that they didn't see the movie.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like, it's all the people that have hate the movie have a complete misunderstanding of what the movie is actually about. And but like, to Betsy's credit, like, she hasn't given into that, and she likes to kind of keep that controversy um surrounding that movie, because then it makes it more of a cult film. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it makes it more of
Yeah.
like a cult film in that sense.
Yeah, no, I think it'll do it
And I
some
don't know.
favors in the long run. The films that can develop this mythos around them, make them something beyond just like you know, video file that you can watch on your computer, because everything gets reduced to content. But if you can have an actual mythos around your film, then no matter what that mythos is, even if it's
Yeah,
supposedly bad or controversial, it will do it a lot of favors. And no, I definitely agree in terms of
yeah,
it's
exactly.
amazing. You talk about new Hollywood versus whatever this incipient thing is that we're talking about in terms of, I don't even know what you want to call it, because I don't think it's dissident right filmmaking or anything like that, but it's kind of a cultural movement that grew out of the soil of what was, if not political, then what was kind of a reactionary towards culture, as you say, reacting against it. That soil
Mhm.
art is coming, and it is, it's,
Yeah,
is it a bit,
it was reacting to, yeah,
yeah,
it
Well,
was
would it
reacting
be?
to what they
Oh,
saw
sorry. Go
as
ahead.
like Hollywood not. It was reacting to what they saw as like Hollywood not like making movies for the actual people.
yeah,
Right? They're making these grand
Yeah.
epics like Cleopatra and Ben-Hur and stuff, and it's like, well, these movies, like, it's not that those movies are bad. Like, this movie, like, Ben-Hur is a great film, but it's that like, we need to have stories, we need to have characters, we need to, like, that actually sort of are of like the people, and are actually like commenting on the current state of things and current changing and the a current change in society. And it's like, and these Hollywood movies just at that time, that they just weren't really doing that. And
Mm.
it's like, and
I
then
don't think
a movie
analogous
like The
now. Yeah.
Graduate really hits about the whole, The Graduate hits like right on that sort of malaise and that sort of uh intergenerational that was happening
Yeah.
then, of like this new generation Dustin Hoffman represents. Is like um uh is like from totally different, he's like this aimless person, and he doesn't know what he wants, and he's being seduced by this person that's Mrs. Robinson from the older generation, but he really wants somebody from the newer generation. He's not even sure if that's even gonna make him happy, and like this like aimlessness that was affecting people at the time. And then you get something like Midnight Cowboy, and I believe it was 69 or 70, and you get Easy Rider, and you get Five Easy Pieces, and like 71. You get all these, and then Scorsese, Altman, Coppola, they all kind of come onto the George Lucas, all these guys kind of come onto the scene, and then it just explodes. And it did help that like we were going into a recession then, and people wanted movies that really spoke to them, and we're going into a recession now, and movies aren't like the Marvel movies aren't doing as well as they used to do. I think Guardians is doing pretty well, but if you look at the movies before that, like,
No, they've been on a
they
downward
didn't top
trajectory.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Change is
don't
in the
even know
air.
how much
Yeah.
money any of those movies actually made, when you account for also the marketing budgets, also how much theaters take away, also how much different people get, like how much money did Doctor Strange actually make? Like, I mean, when you account for everything, I'm not sure. I don't think it's a whole lot. I don't think it's what I don't think it's as much as Disney wanted.
Definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so we're sort of in this like weird limbo phase right now, and this is like really the time to hit, which is why I'm like, and now with the with the writer's strike, there's going to be a period of time too where it's like there's going to be a period of time where it's like, oh, a lot of things aren't going to be that they're not going to be being made. There's going to be this open window for people who are outside the system to get their films shown.
Exactly.
And like, like I'm for like, I'm not like anti the writer's strike. I think it's good in a lot of ways. I'm all for Hollywood just not making anything.
Yeah.
I don't like how it's caused though, like people who are like middle class guys who work as like grips or as grips or as camera guys or art department people,
below
like,
the line
who depend
folks,
on the below the line folks, and now they can't work. Now they're also out of work. Like, I don't like that, but
no.
But at the same time, it's like every sort of situation like this is also an opportunity, and it's going to be I think that there's going to be a window, and I don't think it's going to be a very big window, but there is going to be a window where independent movies, like there's not going to be any mainstream Hollywood movies during the window. It's not going to be this year because like they've already completed everything that's coming out this year. It's going to be like next year and maybe the year after that. There's going to be less mainstream movies, and I think that that's when it's like, if you want to start some sort of new wave, that's when you hit. That's like, so when the writer's strike happened, I was like, oh shit, I'm running out of time. Like I have to get done. I have to write this.
Absolutely.
I have to start getting this.
Because it's already the case that, like, at least for me personally, most of the entertainment I consume is independently produced stuff produced by our guys. So podcasts, books I read, YouTube, video essays, whatever. But the one thing that remains is film and television, because like simply it's just too expensive. It's too talent intensive. You need too many different people working together for our guys to make film and TV. And like, yes, there are some notable exceptions, but as we're discussing, going into this writer's strike, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the time for someone to raise enough money to produce. And I mean, which is not to say there haven't been some. Yes, like Eugene Kotlyarenko's movies. They're certainly. While I wouldn't necessarily call them red pilled, maybe they're clear pilled.
Yeah, he's been making movies for actually quite some time now.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm sick. He's been making movies for like what 10 years.
Yeah.
Now I think.
Oh yeah.
He's been at it. One of the original discoverers of Dasha, from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, you know who the original discoverer of Dasha was?
Adam Friedland.
Was Amanda Milius.
Really?
Oh, right, because she was in her student film, right?
She was in Amanda's like student film, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Was in Amanda's thesis film. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. She loves to tell me that story, and I'm like, Amanda, you've already told this to me. But yeah, no, like that scene though, did kind of grow out of like Eugene's films. Like I discovered Dasha through Wobble Palace.
Great movie. Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know that she was Sailor Socialism until like honestly like last year. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's the same. Oh, that's the actress from Wobble Palace. That's always how I framed it, But yeah, no, that's been growing, and I'm glad to see more people sort of stepping into this to actually make stuff that's like that's different. Like obviously like a movie like Spree is something that a Hollywood studio wouldn't really get behind. And I think that there were walkouts at the showing at Sundance of Spree.
That sounds right. Yeah, which is weird because it's not even that
I'd
Yeah,
have to fact
crazy
check
of a
that,
movie, but
it's
yeah.
not even that offensive. Like,
but I found it kind of funny that the main actor in there, his name is, I joke about this in my video. The main actor in there is named Joe Keery, which is like Joker.
Yeah. Well, he was in Stranger Things, of course. Well, what's interesting with Spree is that, like, yes, it is kind of this outside, a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't even call it an outsider movie, but yeah, a sort of distant or outsider edge to it. But it also had some big names behind it. You know, Joe Keery. One of the Arquettes is in it. Hulu ended up getting behind it, you know, and
David Arquette wasn't Drake.
David Arquette, yeah.
Didn't Drake produce?
Drake, yeah, Dream Crew. Now I don't know if that means Drake himself actually watched the movie, but yeah, they threw some money. You know, they were a producer on it. They put some money in. So, and I believe Dream Crew also produces Euphoria, which you know, is not really dissident in the way that we're talking about, but nevertheless, I like Euphoria.
Produced by Drake, yeah. Executive producer is Drake.
So there is even
music by James Ferraro. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize Ferraro was. I mean, he's very much of this ilk as well. Yeah, like I don't think Drake is like based per se, but I do think there's some interesting people even on level who want good art and are willing to support. Yeah.
I would even say too that, like, even though they're kind of, they might fall more into like dirtbag leftists, but the Safdies are also sort of
completely, yeah,
in that they're a part of that. And you know, like a movie like Good Time was so refreshing. When I saw that, I was like, wow, this is like watching a 70s Scorsese movie, you know.
For sure. And One O Tricks by Never, for that, I believe vaguely associated with Red Scare, and definitely knows Eli Anakashian's, you know.
Well, then Eli was in the music department for Uncut Gems.
Right.
Like,
so no, there's definitely like networks that go beyond, you know, people who know Curtis Yarvin at play here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's an exciting time as far as like what's going to happen this year. I think it's going to be honestly, like, as far as this year, it's going to be more just sort of reactionary to whatever Hollywood is putting out, which I've kind of checked out of, like, doing that. Because to me, I see that as just like pissing in the wind, you know? It's
completely.
Okay, like, everyone knows. Like, what am I gonna say about the Little Mermaid that like nobody said?
But
it's that
things have been said already. But it's also, I think, because people are starting to feel like we're kind of winning, so to speak. I think people are starting to realize, oh, this is I'm no longer necessarily like a one voice in the room saying this movie sucks. Like, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, everyone kind of thinks this, like, which means the next step is to actually make better movies.
Yeah, and I think too that it's like when you kind of feel like you are gonna win, right?
Yeah.
You just stop paying attention to what the other people are doing, because you see it as as I see like all these Disney movies, I just see them as unimportant. I'm like, it's not even. I went and saw Guardians out of, as I said, a morbid curiosity, but I don't really think about it outside of, like, I watch it, I kind of give my opinion on Letterboxd, and then I completely forget about it. I'm not going to make a video on it. I'm not going to do anything like that. I do like to keep up and see, like, what are they putting out? Like, what's everyone who wants to do something new, like, going up against? But I don't let it, like, take up too much, like, mental space or anything. I don't want to give too much psychic energy to it. But it's like, I'm not going to see The Little Mermaid. I'm not going to see any of these like Disney live action adaptations. Like, I'm not going to see whatever new Star Wars show that they have.
Oh no!
To me, it's just like, it's like those are relics. Those are relics of the past. They're not worthy of my time or my energy. And you know, it's just time to move on. Like, they might be making money now, but it's a dwindling. You know, that they're having like their cultural relevance is kind of becoming less and less and less. And you know, like, and so it's, you know, I think that we're at a point where it can be like, oh yeah, who cares? Yeah, of course Disney's woke. Of course.
No, it's
But who
so
cares?
banal and tired at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would we
Yeah,
say
just,
is
you know,
next for you at this juncture? You're working on these screenplays, and you know,
yeah.
potentially moving forward with a couple of them.
Yeah, so I'm keeping up my well, I gotta send this guy a text because for watching Philosophy of a Knife today. Um
Cool.
uh but the well, I think that like I'm gonna keep up my YouTube channel at least for now.
Yeah,
you know, I also have my day
absolutely
job.
should.
And
People love it.
yeah, so I'm keeping up my YouTube channel for now. I'm doing some new things on the channel. I've been helping out Asher with his short film, and hopefully I get to work on that set. But yeah, so so I'm gonna keep up the YouTube channel, and I'm gonna try to get into production of this film maybe near to the end of the year. And get more into feature filmmaking. That's partially why I was in New York. I was like meeting up with people that I wanted to be a part of it.
Nice.
And I want to get like and I'm also like want to get my YouTube channel back up and running like end of this month and into next month after I finish the script. I also have been sort of doing some pre-planning on making like a film magazine for people with outsider perspectives on
Great. Yeah.
things like
Right.
kind of akin to like a new Cahiers du Cinema. But I'm learning about how that all works right now, so it's probably gonna take me a month to just kind of go through and like figure out how to actually make a magazine like that. And but yeah, so that's kind of, you know, the trajectory of like what I plan to do. I actually have my movie cast. I have
Awesome.
the lead roles.
I've heard. Yeah.
cast in the script. It's going to be Eggy. Is going to be the main character.
Perfect.
And yeah,
It's gonna be Toby.
yeah, and yes, he's
Very
going to be
cool.
Toby. Yeah. Well, I just call it Toby just because that's his like fake alias name online.
Oh
I'll
shit!
probably go
Wait,
through and
I
change
have
all
to
the
comment on this.
different-
But the character in my book
Yeah.
about a similar topic is also named Toby. Pretty weird. Go on.
Right? Yeah, I'm probably gonna change the name. It's just something that like I was just like, okay, well I'm writing it for him, and his like alias, also his other alias is Toby Ronaldo. So
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'll just call him this, like, and then I can figure out like what I want their names to be after the first draft. And yeah, so I'm just gonna get into production of that. Hopefully that'll be smooth sailing. And you know, like, and on paper, Dan, you probably saw this on paper, like when you hear the script, it's kind of feels like Taxi Driver, but I don't know if you picked up on how I'm writing it, or there's a lot more like I would say Kieślowski and Gaspar Noé influence.
Yeah.
And
Sure,
actually how
yeah.
I'm, like, writing it. And
Yeah, I
Gus Van
can
Sant
sense that.
influence as well.
Definitely Gus Van Sant.
Yeah,
and
like-
definitely parallels to Elephant. I saw.
Yeah, I love Elephant.
Yeah.
I love Elephant so much. And yeah, it's like, so it's like when I say this, like when I give people the log line, they're like, oh, it's like Taxi Driver. I'm like, well, if you like, I don't like, I'm literally doing everything in the script to make it not like Taxi Driver. You know, I'm literally, and Buffalo 66 is also a big
You know, that
inspiration
has
on
been
it.
on my list for so
Too.
long. I have not seen it yet, but who knows? Maybe even tonight. Convince my girlfriend to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Vincent
a nice
Gallo is so
romantic
big in that.
movie.
Unironically, though, it is.
Oh, good.
Unironically,
Yeah, I
it's a
don't
nice
know the
romantic
ending,
movie.
so I wasn't sure. But
Yeah, well, I won't tell you the ending, but it is literally the movie of "It's so over, we're so back."
oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's literally yeah. So Don't expect it to go to levels of darkness, but don't expect it to stay there.
Oh, good. Good to know.
Yeah, it is a nice romantic movie, just like The Brown Bunny is a nice romantic movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's next on our
It's a
list.
date movie. That's what Vincent Gallo. That's what Vincent Gallo said. It's a date movie. But yeah,
Well,
yeah.
all right.
Did you guys go to the Gallo event we did in New York?
Unfortunately, I believe
Like
that was when I
6 months
was in Austin. Potentially, right? That was like the weekend you
back
were
in
here.
October.
Oh, then no, I didn't. Sorry.
No, the weekend I was here was for the James Ferraro show.
Oh, okay, sure.
But in October we did an event with Vincent. That was really cool. Very, very sweet man. Very misunderstood. He's misunderstood, honestly, because he likes to be misunderstood, I think.
Yeah.
But
Like
yeah,
many of us.
I only have good things to say. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
You
not that
gotta
our
keep that air of mystique.
Yeah, not that our listeners even need it, but they can find you on YouTube at the Kino Corner, the Kino Corner. There we go. Not not with the boomer pronunciation. Kino, the Kino Corner. And are there any other things you might wish to plug at this point?
Yeah, sure. I'll plug a podcast I do with my friend Mumkey Jones called Is It Kino?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sometimes on it, sometimes I'm not on it. So just depending upon if I see the movie or not. Like there's a rotating guest list, rotating hosts on that one. But I'm on it fairly often. Is It Kino? It's the Kino Corner too across Twitter, Instagram. Pretty much, I try to make it simple. Letterboxd. It's easy to find me.
Yeah,
I guess
if you were looking for movies to watch, as I often am, there are a lot aggregated on the Kino Corner. So like you can just there are videos where I think you list like 10 Kino movies, and just
those are fun videos to make.
Yeah. It will expose our listeners to all the classics that have been buried by the woke mob.
Pavlikovsky. Yeah, watch some. I think one of the movies I recommended on one of the videos is and I'll leave this. This will be my last thing. Is The Man Who Stole the Sun, which was written by Leonard Schrader, Paul Schrader's brother, about a high school science teacher who builds a nuclear bomb in Japan and takes the Japanese government hostage.
Oh, cool!
It's a good movie.
Wow, that does sound good.
Yeah, you can watch it on the Internet Archive. That's
I
think excellent.
That's always a plus when it's totally free. Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out. Move over, World War II documentaries. Check out this one.
Yeah. Well, hey, so good to meet you. I'm sure we'll keep talking. I'm going to check out this.
Likewise, man.
Treatment. I'll get the treatment from Dan, and I know, excited to see what you put together. It sounds like you got a lot of irons in the fire. And I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on, dude. Really appreciate it. It's great to have you here. Next time I'm in Austin, I'll look you up, and please, next time you're in New York, say hello.
Yeah, of course, man. All right, well, I have to run, so I'll see you guys later.
All right. Bye.
See ya.